And welcome to the delicious recipe here on UPRN. And if you're listening to us, you can be listening on any of the podcast sites there is: iHeart, Spreaker, SoundCloud. And if you want to watch live, you can go over to YouTube. There's UFO Paranormal Radio. It's done twice, and UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials, and that's you can watch there. There's also on Facebook the UPRN or Joe Montaldo site, and there's also on my site the Delicious Recipe on Facebook. You can check that out too as well. And I'm just double checking here that we're here. And so I called this one. Northern Ribs au Natural. And you might get a little bit of the joke in that later on as this story goes on. And I want to welcome back Jim Paris again. This is almost like a part three. Good day there, Jim.
Yep. How are you doing?
Not too bad, and you're doing well yourself there. We were just talking earlier before the show started. So this comes into a sort of an interesting story, and let's see how I sort of put this here. I understand you flew with Canada's most famous cannibal.
No, I flew with Canada's most infamous cannibal.
Infamous. So there we go.
And I'm hoping tonight that people that are listening to your podcast, maybe they can help us solve the mystery of how a fella could crash a plane and almost kill my father and go on to change his name and get another pilot's license and then kill four more people. My God.
Yeah, and he had a little taste for some ribs, I guess. Eh? That's sort of like the little joke. so, so let's start out at the beginning. How does this all start into there with your before your dad crashes with this guy?
Well, we were in Timmins, Shania Twain's hometown, and my dad needed a crew, a couple crews actually, is what I put together to go up on the Nelson River just north of the Cross Lake Reserve. There's a big widening of the Nelson River there, and so I got Rick Lewis, who was my lead guitar player's twin brother, and they weren't identical twins, but so you had no trouble telling them apart. They were like night and day. Rick had flaming red hair, and Barry had sort of mousy brownish blondish hair, and they're interestingly enough, their father lived in Timmins, but he was an eye surgeon, and he used to go down to Chicago and do operations all the time.
Oh
So
wow!
Dr. Lewis was a well-known Timmins surgeon. And then the third member of the party was the Tripper. He was one of my roadies in a band called the Fallen Leaves. And the Beatles had a song out right then called Day Tripper. And this fellow, Murray Powers, he used to walk around South Porcupine, which is now part of Timmins, of course, and with a jar of peanut butter and a big spoon and walk around all night eating peanut butter. The cops would pull up and they'd say, Murray, what are you doing? He said, I'm having my peanuts mashed up here. And he always had some smart aleck remark. So the three of us were the initial part of the crew, and we knew we'd be able to pick up somebody else in Flin Flon, a fourth member, because we were going to be doing geophysics on the ice for the next 3 months. And we work in two-man crews. You have a big hoop around you that creates electromagnetic field. And so the front hoop, he sends a signal to the back hoop, and then that measures down into the ground. And the back hoop, you have a big console on your chest, and you twist the dials, and you measure down into the ground. And if there happens to be anything that conducts electricity, like graphite, sulfides, anything like that, occasionally you get conductive loon shit on the bottom of the lakes, and it'll pick it up and form what we call an anomaly. And then the geos come in and they look at it. The geophysics guys recommend we should drill here.
Mm-hmm.
So we left Timmins and headed towards Flin Flon, and we didn't get very far, and we had our first big adventure.
Right. Yes, this is the whole part about this is all of northern Canada. You're going from northern Ontario up to northern Manitoba and into northern Saskatchewan. Well, because Flin Flon is shares a road with Creighton, Saskatchewan, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, that's right, right on the
Yeah,
border.
and they have a big mine there, gold mine. That the mine actually goes in between both Manitoba and Saskatchewan.
Yeah, the joke was if you got hurt underground, make sure you knew where the border was underground and you could crawl over into Saskatchewan because Saskatchewan had better compensation rates than Manitoba. You were down in a drift and you saw some guy go crawling by, you tell him, keep going, the border's that way, buddy.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, Flin Flon was an unbelievable place to grow up in. The hockey fans there were rabid dogs. I mean, rabid people. Oh, they loved their hockey, and of course, that was the motto in Flin Flon was work hard, play hard, and they supported the Flin Flon Bombers. Anyways, we left Timmins and my 1965 Buick I bought from Eddie Vinecourt that owned the Bon Air Motel.
Mhm.
Eddie was a character. Uh, I used to get a kick out of him. He used to run along the roof of the motel there, listening in at the pipe, you know, that runs up from the bathroom, and
Oh,
he'd check each room as he went along to hear if there was a party going on or whatever. So
right.
we leave Timmins and we head out and we get to Portage La Prairie the next day, and we're driving down the main street, riding on my plastic, and we see the marquee on this old movie theater. It says tonight, the Guess Who. We're like,
Right.
what? We were just had a big party with the Guess Who with Burton and Jimmy Cale, and
Right.
I said, hey, let's go in and see the boys. So we went and grabbed a burger or something like that where we could use my plastic to pay the bill. We came back, we went into the ticket wicket there and said to the girl, we said, hey, we're friends of the band. You mind letting us in? And she said, no, you got to pay. We said, we got no money. We only got the plastic.
Right.
Well, I'll go and get Burton. She says, well, I'll get him out here. So at the end of the first set, he came out and he said, put these guys are our friends. Put them on our tab. Take it off, whatever we make tonight. So we go in, and what a hoot! It was an old movie theater, and they had taken the seats out. But you know, in a movie theater, in order to they put the seats as you go up from
On
the
the
bottom of the theater up to the top. They stagger the seats, so the floors are on an angle. And here's the kids in there dancing to the music of the Guess Who, like side heel gougers. They're, they're, they're trying to hang on to each other and not fall over. So we got a big charge out of that. So we sat there and waited till the show was over. And then Burton came over and he said, hey guys, how are you doing? We said, well, we're headed to northern Manitoba. We got a job up on the Nelson River hooping. Hooping, what the hell's that? He said, well, form of geophysics. That's what Hudson Bay used to find most of their ore bodies over the years. So he said, well, we got a brand new song we're going to be recording in Minneapolis in a couple of weeks. Wow. Any chance we could hear it? He says, Randy, get your guitar out. Randy looks, he's not a big fan of Jim Paris and partying with Burton and Jimmy
Well,
Cale.
well, that was the thing with Burton Cummins. He was a very stout Mormon, and he didn't drink or smoke, and
Oh,
didn't like.
you're talking about Randy. Randy
Yeah,
was
Randy Bachman. Yeah.
yeah. So, anyways, Randy finally gets his guitar out, and they start playing the opening licks, and then Burton starts singing, "These eyes were made for crying." We're like, wow, and they sang the whole song, and we couldn't believe it. We were listening to us. We were the first ones to hear this song before it was recorded.
Right.
It ended up being a major hit for them,
Hmm.
which is all part of the story. So, anyways, we left Portage. We headed out. We didn't mind driving all night. We got into Flin Flon the next morning. It's about a 550-mile trip up there.
Hmm.
And we had to go on the old highway by Brandon and then up number 10. Now you can go up number 6 and you can do it in about 9 hours.
Right.
We got into Flin Flon, grabbed a little shut eye, went down on Main Street, and lo and behold, the first kid we met, we said, hey, you want to go to work? Pardon me. He said, doing what? We said, hooping. That's what we called it.
Right.
Electromagnetic surveying. And he said, hooping, what the hell do I have to do? All you have to do is wear this hoop and walk down the line, either through the bush or out on the lake, and stop every 100 feet and press a button. And I take the reading, and then we move to, yeah, he says, I'm game for that.
Mhm.
What we didn't know is this guy had been in a heck of a car accident back a couple of years earlier. And when we got out in the bush, he was always falling apart. His arm would come out of the socket, his knee would discombobulate, and we'd have to stop, and he'd have to get a piece of a tree and put it in under the back of his leg. So, anyways, we get going, and every Saturday night we'd come in off the lake and we'd turn on the hit parade. And the first week it was here's a Guess Who with These Eyes, number 88. Next week it was number 47. Next week it was number 21. And we were like, come on, guys, come on. We're rooting for you. I mean, we're living in this stupid fish shack, and four guys in almost like a 10 by 12 fish shack. And so anyways, the next week, and after we'd eat supper and that, we'd go down to the reserve and get in on the dance and the jigging and everything down there. So this one week we tuned in, and the announcer says, and here's the Guess Who with the number one song this week, These Eyes. So we got four guys jumping around, hooping and hollering and yelling and screaming. I don't think anybody could hear
us. Out in the middle of no man's land.
Yeah, pretty much in the middle of the Nelson River. And so we get on the skidoos. We had two skidoos. We get on the skidoos. We go down to the reserve. We walk in, and the back of the hall is just packed, body to body, no space. And we get in there, and of course, we're wearing our parkas and our bush gear, bush pants and that. And as soon as Rick takes off his toque, then the red hair jumps out. A hush goes over the crowd. The band stops, and people are coming over, and they're actually touching Rick like I guess they'd never seen flaming red hair before.
Right.
And this is going back a lot of years.
Yeah.
1969, and so we walk in the door, and the crowd would be flowing around and back out the door. So, I mean, you were packed in there so tight, you had to go with the flow. So after about 20 minutes, you'd be back outside. Then you get in the lineup again, you go back in, you'd be back outside. And the band's playing, and the native people are jigging and having a great time. And every time I get in there, I could feel something going on around my legs, my feet. What's going on down there? So finally, I got a little space. I looked down, it was all the kids were crawling in. They weren't tall enough to be in there. So anyways, life was going on. And then, unfortunately, I put a skidoo through the ice. The ice was starting to candle. The geese were starting to fly over. My God, you could almost knock those geese over with a paddle because they were looking for open water, and we'd be surveying across on our lines on the lake, and the geese would come in right over top of us, not paying any attention to us. They were just looking for that open water where they could land.
Right.
So anyways, I put the skidoo through the ice, and we managed to get the sleigh unhooked before the skidoo went down. And then it was funny because I said, well, we got to get that skidoo out of there. So the tripper, it was actually a nice sunny day. We're standing out on the ice, and the tripper, he strips down to nothing, and he jumps in, think he's going to be a big hero and tie a rope on the back of the skidoo.
Oh, geez.
We're going to pull it back up. Well, as soon as he got in that water, he popped back up again and screaming and yelling, and we helped him get out. What's the problem? He said, my testicles disappeared. He said,
the trip became a girl.
Yeah. So I said, well, I'll do it. So, I mean, it was my fault. So I grabbed the rope and stripped down to my gotchis and jumped in and dove down there, and I tied the rope on the back bumper of the skidoo. And anyways, between the four of us, we got a couple of native people that were going up the lake to help us come, and we got the skidoo back out and drained the water out of the motor and gave it a couple cranks and started right back up.
Right.
So my dad said, my dad was getting worried about the ice going, and we had one more job to do down at the reserve, right in front of the reserve.
Hmm.
And there was a rapids up at the top of the reserve, and then there was sort of like a little lake, and then there was another big rapids below that. And one day we were out on the ice there surveying, and my goodness, a bombardier went by, and I wasn't paying much attention. It was full of people, and another bombardier went by. Okay, well, the ice got to be safe. So I walked over there, whoosh, down I went. And I was hanging on to my hoop, and I yelled at the tripper, "Don't let me go."
Right.
There was such a current underneath there, it was trying to drag me underneath the ice. And
Yeah.
the tripper had hold of our 300-foot cable, and he was hanging on for dear life there.
Yeah.
And I started to go under the ice, and I threw my notebook up. I didn't want to lose my, at least if I drowned, maybe somebody'd be able to get my note. And anyways, Tripper, he did a good job, and he hung on to me long enough, so I flopped around like a big whale, and I got out on the ice. And
Right.
oh man, that was a close call, but I could feel the water like pulling me underneath the ice. And the other rapids was down about 800, 1,000 feet from where we were working.
Right.
You know, by
So
the time I came out,
when does your dad come in there after while this is all like the breakup of the ice and all that's going on there now?
yeah, well, what happened was because we were in a hurry to get down there and move, he sent a plane in to help us move because we had, so much gear, and 4 guys and 2 skidoos, and I don't think we had a sleigh with us. Maybe we had, yeah, no, we had 1 sleigh. So he sent this pilot in. Guy was flying for Parsons Airways out of Flin Flon,
Mhm.
and I'd never seen him before. Never. When he landed, he said, "I'm here to move you guys," and we said, "Yeah, we know." So we said, "What's your name?" "Leopold." "Get in." "Oh, this guy's a little bit gruff." So I loaded my stuff in there. I jumped in the plane. "How are you doing?" Oh, he was I didn't know at the time, but he was a pretty pure German fellow with flown in the Luftwaffe at the end of the Second World War, 1944. Apparently, I read that somewhere that he flew gliders, which could well be. But anyways, I learned that his name was Leopold Hermann. So he flew us down. He flew me down, and I unloaded my gear on the ice and hauled it up till we'd rented a cabin. And then he went back and got some more gear and some more people. And 2 of the guys drove the skidoos down. So that was my first introduction to Leopold Hermann. And after we finished that job, we came back to Flin Flon and worked there for a couple of months. And then my dad sent the tripper and I out to Piney Lake,
Right.
which was about 30 miles from Pelican Narrows.
Right. That's in Saskatchewan, right? Yeah.
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 And so we went in there, and the grid was already cut. They had a bunch of native line cutters in there, and they cut a nice grid for us. You cut a line through the bush. You got to cut the trees and that out of the way and throw them over, and so that we can walk down there with our well, in the wintertime with our snowshoes on. But they'd had this grid cut for months before we got there, so we put up our
Mhm.
tent, got organized, started the survey, and that went on for about 2 weeks. And it got to be right around the end of June. And the last day we were surveying, we were just about finished. What happens? We get 6 inches of snow.
Right. And this is June.
This is the end June. Yeah.
Yeah. That
Piney
was
Lake.
that was like that one staking rush in Shining Tree in the beginning of June. We had like a t-shirt weather all at the end of May, and then the claims that we had the stake. I think there was like on June 1st or 3rd or something like that. The night just before, the temperature dropped, and all of a sudden there's 4 inches of snow on the ground at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, that's the vagaries of Mother Nature for sure.
It's just unbelievable how some like you figure you're in the summertime, and then there's certain spots around in northern Ontario and Manitoba and Saskatchewan where you'll just get a freak snowstorm.
Yeah. So that was our last day. We got the 6 inches of snow, and then it started melting. And so we're back at camp there, and I'm working on my notes, and all once we hear a plane. And this plane comes in, lands on our lake, Piney Lake, and comes up to our little dock there that we built. And it's Leopold Herman, and my dad is with him, and Art O'Donnell, who was another geologist, worked for my dad. He was there, and they came in and they said, how's the job going? I said, fine, we're finished. Hey, I said, I want to catch a ride with you guys. It's Saturday. I want to get into the Royal Hotel there and party it up with my buddies.
Right.
My dad said, what are you talking about? He said, we got the back seats, Art sitting in the back, but we got all sorts of samples. He said that we picked up from another camp. He said, too much weight will never get you in. I said, wow, let's throw out the samples. Tripper can bring them with him tomorrow. And my dad said, you're going to leave your buddy in the bush for the night? I said, hey, what? Come on. I've been here in the bush for 3 weeks. I'm anxious to wrap my lips around the top of a blue beer.
Right,
so anyways, my dad said, no. This lake's too dangerous. I'll send Leopold back in the morning to get you. So they taxi down to the end of the bay, and I hear the plane revving up its motor, and then it comes by the dock eventually, and he gets up in the air. And down at that end of Piney Lake, there was a big rock wall about 200 feet high. At least that's what it seemed like to us from our vantage point.
Right.
And there's a bunch of spruce trees on the top, and they get off the water and they get up in the air, but you can see from our vantage point that the trajectory of the plane, and unless he gets real lucky here, he's not going to make it up over that hill.
Right.
So I'm like, oh my God. And I'm yelling, I'm screaming, get up. And I'm thinking, at the last few seconds, I was thinking, well, I'm going to see my dad get killed right in front of my eyes here. But they must have got lucky and got a bit of an updraft, just the way the wind was blowing. And it helped them get up the last few feet. And the last time I saw the plane, it was going right through the tops of those spruce trees. And I listened to hear if the motor stopped, or if the force of the spruce trees was too much for the plane and they crashed. And a few seconds later, I could hear the plane in the distance. They made it through the trees and took off. So anyways, we went to bed. We got up in the morning and we're eating breakfast, and we hear the plane coming. So we tear down the tent and we get all ready to pack it. We got our gear all packed up, and the plane comes in, and it's not Leopold, and it's not the Cessna 180 that they had the night before. It's a beaver, de Havilland beaver, the smaller little cousin of the otter.
Right. And people that are listening, they're usually like the Cessnas is a certain size, then you go up beaver, then you go to otter, then you go up to twin otters, and that they get bigger. But a lot of these bush planes are sort of named after animals. So
the pilot comes, he comes up to our little dock there, and I said, how come you came in to get us? So Leopold was supposed to come back. And the pilot said to me, he said, well, you saw what just about happened with your dad last night, right? And I said, yeah. He said, this lake is too hard to get out of. He said, with a 180 and a big load of equipment and 2 guys. So he said, your dad took Leo with him today to fly out to a Tiddy Lake where we had another camp, bunch of natives blasting trenches there. Fella, I forget his first name now. I remember his last name was Bear. And the pilot said, your dad specifically said, go and pick up Jim and the beaver. So here I am. So we loaded all our stuff in the beaver, went down to the end of the lake. We took off, no problem clearing that big rock hill. We're flying on our way back to Flin Flon. And I'm looking down, looking at the lakes and the trees like I always do, imagining, fishing on that lake. Maybe there's ore body. They're looking for rust because you're always on the lookout for rust. That's a sign of oxidation. Could be some sulfide minerals down there.
Yeah, and a lot of these planes too, they're not flying like thousands of feet up in the air. They're only flying like a few hundred feet above the ground like that. That's what I sort of remember when we flew into Knife Lake or Mokumen Lake, whatever, up in northern Saskatchewan. And you could see everything. Like we were one time we're in the wintertime because you could see all the caribou tracks and that. And but it was
very true. So we're flying along, and the pilot's got his headphones on. I got my headphones on, and I'm looking out the window. All at once I hear the pilot say, "Holy shit! Holy!" He's just, I'm like, what happened? He said, "Well, I just got a message from the base that your dad and Leo crashed on a Titty Lake." I'm like, "What? They crashed?" Oh my God! We land in Flin Flon. We throw all our stuff out on the dock. I jump up on the wing. I start pumping the gas in the Beaver,
Mhm.
and the pilot is freaking out. We jump back in the plane. We left Tripper there. The pilot and I fly back out to a Titty Lake, which from Flin Flon was about 40 miles. And so we circle over the camp, and we're looking for the plane. And there we see it at the end of the bay in the bush. And it's way up in the trees. What the hell happened? So we land at the camp, and I said, is everybody alive or dead, or what's going on? Well, they came and took your dad. He was injured, so they took him down to the Titty Lake Lodge there. I was run by some people out of Flin Flon. And we got the pilot is at the camp here. So I'm looking at Leopold, and he doesn't want to look at me. And he said, "What happened?" He just makes a few grunts and doesn't tell me any explanation. So we get him in the plane. We take off and we circle over top of the wreckage. And it wasn't until later on that I heard the story from my dad, but we take him back to the dock at Flin Flon there, Schist Lake, Parsons Base. He jumps out of the plane. He runs right to the bunkhouse. 10 minutes later, comes out with his suitcases, and he jumps in his little Volkswagen there. Poof, gone. Never to be seen again.
Right.
But that's part of the rest of the story.
So, but the part out of it, what did your dad say happened with the crash?
What happened was we had a drill there, and we were drilling, and my dad told Leopold, he said, "Make some circles around. I want to see if I can see what's going on with the rocks and maybe some faults, whatever, that are all part of the geology package that you look for." And so after they made a couple circles around, I guess Leopold got combobulated, or discombobulated, I should say.
Right.
I guess, not combobulated, no. And my dad said, "Take her in." So he lands, and there was 5 miles of water. Like when you come by the camp, if you had landed the plane straight out, there's 5 miles of water. But what does he do? He lands right into this dead end bay. So the plane's going along the top of the water, and my dad suddenly realizes that even though he's got his flaps down, the wind is behind him.
Right there. So they're going too fast to stop.
Yeah, normally you land into the wind with your flaps down so that it breaks you.
Right.
Helps to slow the plane down. But no, he's just going to beat hell right for the shore.
Right.
And you can see on the shore, well, I saw it when we landed there. There was big rocks, like 10, 12 feet high, I guess, put there by the glacier. Big poplar trees, old growth poplar trees like this. Couldn't even get your arms around them.
Right.
And that's where the plane was, up in the bush there. So when I finally talked to my dad, I said, "So that's what happened. He landed downwind." And my dad said, "Yeah." And he said, "I could see we weren't going to make it, that we were going to crash into those rocks." And he said, I yelled at him, Leo, do something, do something. And he was hanging on to the stick, the steering wheel there of the plane.
Yeah, the yoke.
Knuckles were just white. And he said the famous words. I'll never forget those words. He says, "Oi, oi, oi." He said, "We landed downwind again." And my dad said, "What the hell do you mean again? You've done this before?" So at the last second, he put it on full power, and they flew right over top of the rocks, but they couldn't miss the trees. They flew up into the poplar trees. One wing went, tore off.
Yeah.
And the plane sort of settled down, but it was still about 10 feet off the ground. The tail of the plane. The front of the plane was about 15, 16 feet. You know what happened then? There was a noise up in the front of the plane, my dad told me. And of course, my dad was 6'5" and 270 pounds at the time. And those little plane seats, they run on a track. And when they hit the poplar trees, my dad got smashed right up against the dash. And he broke his thumb. and he didn't know if he was hurt internally or not.
Right.
And they were sitting there, and this something in the front was going tick, 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 tick. And my dad said, "Leo, what is that? Turn it off. Turn the engine off." And he just freaked out, and he started smashing the windshield out with his fists. You try that sometime. Smash out the windshield on a plane with
Yeah.
just thick plexiglass with your fists.
Yeah.
You're going to wreck your hands.
Oh,
He
for
climbed
sure.
out through the hole in where he got punched out with his fist, and he jumped about 15 feet down to the ground and boom, ran off in the bush. Left my dad there to fry.
Oh,
So
jeez.
eventually, my dad got extricated. He couldn't get out his door. The wing was up against his door.
Right.
So eventually, he got enough pieces out, and he climbed up on top of the plane. And now he's looking down. You know, I forget where he was in his 50s, and he's looking down and he's saying, "If I jump down there, I'm probably going to break my legs."
Right.
You know, it's all bush and rocks and everything. So he gets up on top of the plane, and he decides he's going to slide down the fuselage. Well, in the impact of the plane, of course, the plane's all built in sections and it's all riveted.
Yeah.
One of the sections had moved and it had formed this hook on the corner. So my dad gets sliding down the fuselage and he can't stop, and it gets him. It tears his leg open, and he lands down in the bush there, and he's got a broken thumb, and the natives come over in the boat, and of course they call my dad Ugamau, the big chief, and
Mhm.
my dad's jumping around in the bush holding his leg, and his thumb is hurting pretty bad. They're
I
all
guess. I
patting
guess he wasn't a good hitchhiker. I guess that day, eh, with a
him.
broken thumb.
The natives are all patting him, calling him Ugamau, and they say, "Ugamau, are you okay? Are you okay?" My dad said, "No, Frick, I'm not okay. Get me to the camp." So, anyways, then I guess the people at the lodge heard it on the airwaves, and they came up with a boat. So when I
Yeah.
got to the camp, of course, my dad, they took him down to the lodge. So we had to go fly back out and get him, and that's when I heard the story. So, anyways, now the story jumps. How much time have we got?
We got about just under, well, about 13 minutes there, because this is where it goes into the whole part about
Yeah,
who pops
this
up in the Northwest Territories.
this is 1969 when my dad crashes on a Titty Lake with Leopold Herman. Now we jump to 1972. I think it was in November that that plane crash happened, and well, I mean, we hadn't heard hide nor hair of Leopold Herman since, and
Right.
maybe
He disappeared after he jumped in his Volkswagen. Nobody's seen this guy. Nobody's heard of him. Parsons Air don't know where to find him.
no.
Nothing.
And certainly my dad and I had never flown with him. In fact, my dad would never fly again in a bush plane. That was his last trip. He always sent Art or myself or one of the other Mike. We had another geologist working with us there, Mike Hendricks. He would send us out to do the jobs or out to the bush to check the drill core or whatever. So now we jump ahead to November 1972, and this pilot was flying from Cambridge Bay to Yellowknife on a mercy mission with an pregnant Eskimo woman, and a little Eskimo boy that had appendicitis, and the nurse. He'd been dropping off some prospectors. I only recently learned this. He'd been dropping off some prospectors in Cambridge Bay. I'm like, in the middle of November, you're dropping off prospectors? Okay, well, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And the nurse hired him to fly this mercy mission. So they all
Right.
get in.
It was what's called like a back trip, right? He's going out there and then he's coming back loaded, and
Well, he's
she's
going to
got
get
sick
paid for the
people.
back.
Yeah.
The call. And so, anyways, they run into this humongous big snowstorm somewhere along the line. They go off course. Of course, the pilot had no credentials for flying without instruments. And once you get in a big snowstorm, the instruments that are in those planes, he was flying a Beech 18. They don't help you very much anyway. So he's losing altitude and he's turning. Pardon me. He flies right into the side of a hill and crashes. So there's the wreckage. The nurse was killed in the wreckage. I think the Eskimo woman they felt was killed in the wreckage. like when the impact of the crash. And the only two survivors at the time were the pilot
Yeah.
and the little Eskimo boy. He lived for
Yeah.
about
I think you said his name was Davy Hawktook or something like that. Is
yeah
that what it,
David
yeah.
Fitzuriak Kutuk.
Oh, okay. Right.
Kut-
And the pregnant lady dies with her unborn child.
yeah,
So there's
and the
that.
nurses.
Yeah.
So the kid lives for 23 days. And the only thing they, after the first day or two, whatever food they did have on the plane, that's gone. So there's only one thing to do, and the pilot, he can't do anything. I always thought he had broken ankles, but I read recently that he had the broken legs.
Okay.
I think it was ankles, but maybe somebody can confirm that or deny it or whatever. So the Eskimo boy, the pilot told the Eskimo boy, you better start cutting some strips of flesh off the bodies. And the kid is like, what? Okay. So he'd cut a piece of flesh off the leg or the arm. I think he mainly the nurse, and and put it in a pot of boiling water and cook it, and that's what he would give to the pilot. But he would not eat the flesh of a person. He would bark off the trees. That's what he made it 23 days eating bark.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's amazing in itself, because there was actually a movie called Alive, which was dealing with a soccer team that crashed in the Alps, I believe it was, and the survivors there, they had to start eating the rest of their soccer players so that they had enough nourishment to get home.
I think it was the Andes.
The Andes. Oh yeah, Andes. Okay. But the movie was called Alive, anyways. But yeah, this is sort of a similar situation here.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, no food, you're not being rescued. It's either life or death. I don't fault the guy for, but that's not the point of my story, of course. But I mean, I probably would have done the same thing. I would have ate the nurse too. But
right, yeah. But the thing is, I guess the part is with the back trip though. That those are usually because they were going back because it was emergency back trip. Usually those aren't like pre-record, or like they usually have to do a flight record of what's going on.
Well, maybe, yeah. Well, there you go. Maybe that was the problem.
Right. So that's why they were lost so long in the bush, because otherwise, if he would have had a flight record, search and rescue would have went the flight record that he was going to this new location instead of what he was going to do before. The problem was
he was so far off course. He crashed like way. They flew between Cambridge Bay and Yellowknife. They would have found him, but he was way off. He was on a lake called Hada Lake, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, when they eventually rescued him after 31 days and brought him out, I was watching TV and I was so happy that the pilot had lived. We heard it on the news and brought him to Edmonton. They brought him in a wheelchair up to the gate at the airport, and he had a big black bushy beard. The pilot did, and when he came up there, I'm looking at him. I'm like, my God. They're calling this pilot Martin Hartwell, and Stompin' Tom wrote a song about him. My buddy from the Maple Leaf Hotel in Timmins there, Stompin' Tom, he ended up writing a song about, sort of made him into a hero. But I'm looking at this pilot and I'm like, what the hell why are they calling him Martin Hartwell? That's Leopold Herman.
Right.
Herman.
The guy that crashed with the guy that crashed with your dad and then left in his Volkswagen. Now he's got a new name and he's in a new place.
I dialed the phone. We had dial phones back in those days. And I phoned my dad in Flin Flon. I said, Dad, are you watching the news? He says, I can't believe it. He said, that isn't, who the hell is Martin Hartwell? That's Leopold Herman, the guy that I crashed with.
Yeah.
So anyways, the bottom line is that nobody knew about the cannibalism to begin with. Stompin' Tom wrote the song the Martin Hartwell story. And it was, it was a big seller for him for a while. And then
was that the name of the song, the Martin Hartwell story? The name of the song? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Lost up in no man's land, the Martin Hartwell story. So, and then he sings all these verses.
Right.
But I talked to Stompin' Tom a couple of years later, and he didn't even know about that. He was so busy touring and drinking beer that he didn't even know about the cannibalism thing. But
Well, that was one thing you said about Stompin' Tom was is that he had two transport trailers. One was for equipment, the other was for Labatt products, and he thought that whole 45-foot long trailer full of beer was just for him.
well, I mean, he'd be, after do a show, he'd have a party for his band and people that people that came to buy CDs or whatever, and I guess maybe there'd be a few beers come out of the trip. But the point of this whole story tonight was the fact, I wish somebody could explain to me how a pilot that shouldn't have ever been flying again was able to
Yep.
change his name and get a new identification, and on top of that, get a new pilot's license. Like you said earlier, this guy
Yep.
didn't have to pass a test or prove that he had so many flying hours. How did he
Yeah.
pull that off? Is that Arctic rules? Was he able to just say, well, now I'm Martin Hartwell and I can fly planes?
Yeah, see that was the part that when we talked about this last night there, and that was it. Like, how is it possible to get? Because there's a sort of a part that you have to do so many hours to get a license and stuff like that, and you're registered under, especially in Canada, if you're a pilot, and what sort of thing you can fly, because it's just like having a driver's license. You can't if you because you have a driver's license doesn't mean you can do a motorcycle or a transport truck. You have to apply for those licenses and
You
that.
got it.
And,
Yeah.
and so that's what I found was really weird. And I posed this question to you there. Is that I wonder if this Martin Hartwell was somebody that had died that was a pilot, and he just assumed that name because then there would be a record that he was a pilot and had these qualifications.
That's the smartest thing I've heard about this whole story is just what you said. And that
Mm-hmm.
could be exactly what he did. All I know is this story has arms and legs, and we don't have time to tell about all the arms and legs and toes.
Well, we got to still about another less than 9 minutes, anyways. There we can go, but this is the part that the question out of there is. Well, you had said there before, and if this is true, in small little rural communities up in northern Ontario, northern Manitoba, and that is that even up in Alaska and the Yukon, Northwest Territories, is that companies and people up there are just happy to have somebody that does something, right? That can drive a transport, fly a plane or a helicopter or a welder. And if you have something like that, they'll hire you, right? That's because nobody really wants to leave the big city in the warmth down south and work up in the freezing cold.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, but I like your solution to the story here is maybe he did assume. I mean, both those names are Martin Hartwell and Leopold Hermann are Germanish names, so maybe he knew Martin Hartwell that in the war or back in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Another arm of the story is that he had picked up himself up I saw a story the other night on the internet that he was married again, or that he had a wife. And I said, well, as far as I know, with all the research that I'd done, they did a lot of research on this story, and I mean, it'd take 2 or 3 hours to tell everything that I've researched. But he
Mm-hmm.
had a wife back in Germany and a son by the name of Pierre. And when he was laying there in the shelter that David built for him, the little Eskimo boy, he
Yep.
wrote a goodbye note to his son back in Germany, and he said, "If you don't find me alive, I would appreciate if somebody would send this note to Pierre, my son back in Germany." But
Mm-hmm.
he had a woman friend and actually she was instrumental in her father was a professor at one of the universities in down in the Maritimes, I think Nova Scotia, and they were instrumental in having like they quit after a couple of weeks. They quit searching for this guy. They figured he's dead, and
Right.
they put pressure on the police and the government to resume the search.
Mm-hmm.
And on the 31st day, one of the planes that was searching picked up something from the beacon,
Right.
that sends out the signal.
Right. Yep.
And I've read that the question is, why wasn't that signal turned on like it was in the wreckage of the plane? Why was it only turned on the 31st day? Why wasn't it turned on earlier so that maybe one of the planes would have picked it up weeks earlier and it might have saved that Eskimo boy's life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So pretty weird.
yeah, that's like there's so many questions. Is this well, I guess Leopold or AKA Martin, is he still alive or did he disappear again?
Well, he disappeared in the ground.
Oh,
He
did he? Oh, so he passed away.
he died
Okay.
in 2013 and he was 88 years old. So he managed to have, but there's another thing. After this crash, uh, he kept flying and he
Really?
more plane crashes afterwards. He was flying out of a place called Arctic Fox Lodge. When I was in Whitehorse, I saw his card up on the board in the hangar there, and it said Martin Hartwell, lots of northern experience and survival. I'm like, but so after the second, he crashed with my dad, and then after this crash where he killed the people,
Yeah.
basically that's what he did. He shouldn't have been flying without. He didn't have instrument training, and he flew into a big snowstorm. As soon as the snow started, he should have tried to land on a lake. That's what I would have done.
Right. Or turned around and went back. That's something
Some,
anyways.
something different than what he did. But
Yeah.
how did he? How come he didn't lose his license after the second one? He didn't kill
Yeah.
my dad. He just injured him. But the
Yeah.
second time, he killed 4 people.
Yeah. And ate part of one.
Yeah, yeah,
That's enough to if you did that if you weren't a pilot doing that in society they'd have you with the little Hannibal Lecter mask on there and and have you in a room on death row. But I always find that sort of interesting, and I think we had talked about this yesterday before we did the show. And that it's always interesting with con men, and con men have a way to find loopholes and find ways to do things. That's why I said the whole thing is that maybe this Martin not Martin Hartwell, he must have known something about him, or that he had just died and just assumed this guy's identity, because you have to have some sort of registration somewhere, right?
yeah. And I like your theory on that, and maybe we could pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, this story's got so many arms and legs. But talking about con men, I had a buddy back in Timmins, Barry Ainsworth, and he got himself into. He forged a stock certificate and sold it, and got his mother into trouble. And the head of detectives there, Angela Guala, he didn't like Barry Ainsworth very much. And one time he explained to me, we, I have a story, another story to tell you sometime called Silver to Buffalo.
Uh-huh.
And Angela Guala, the head of the detectives, told me, he said, why do you hang around with this Barry Ainsworth guy? He's just trouble. He's a con man. And he says, if he put as much effort into 1 hour of work, he could make twice the amount of money that he, makes doing a con.
Yeah.
But there's people that get a charge out of screwing people around.
Yeah, that's
Money.
true. That even goes into that part with those televangelists. I think Steve Martin did a movie about that, where they were going in and tricking all the people. They are all talking with their earphones because they got the little cards they filled out as they were going in. Oh, I have leukemia. Oh, I have a bad leg, or that. And this is okay. This lady that's coming up there with the white dress. She has leukemia. Lay the saints, demons, take out the leukemia in you. Drop $50 in the bucket on your way out. Oh my God, I've been saved. But yeah, there's so many shows about con men and these con games and stuff like that. I find them so interesting, and I think more people should watch these shows, because then when you come across somebody, you go, "Hey, I understand what's going on here."
Well, the biggest con man of all time in modern history was Bernie Madoff. He made off with all the money.
Right.
Of course, he got caught in the end. But
Yeah.
Bre-X, I've got some good stories about Bre-X and what happened there.
Well, that's for another time there, Jim. We got about 1 minute left there. It says
all right.
You have your book there, Nora Acme Gold Mine Story, that people can pick up, and they can check it out. And where can they find this stuff there for you?
Well, the only place that sells at retail is a bookstore in Winnipeg. They're sort of like a Chapters. I'm trying to think of the name of it. They're in a mall down in the south part of Winnipeg. But right now they told me they're sold out of books, and I haven't been in Winnipeg lately. But the second book that Mark Jackson and I wrote was Head Frames, Happiness, and Heartaches. Mark came up with the name of that book. And of course, the first book was about my grandfather's gold mine at Snow Lake. Now they got a big lithium thing going on there. Snow Lake Lithium stock is trading $7, $6, $7, $8. Fellow by the name of Dan Zilke sold the property to these people. And of course, lithium is a big deal right now.
Yeah. Well, we've run out of time there, Jim. So I want to thank you very much for being on here, and I'll have you on again. There's so many great stories. Like we got the Silver to Buffalo story to go through. Then we also have like the stories of your times in Africa with the people that are over there. There's you got so much to tell. Plus also the music people, and everything like that. It's been great to have you on there. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Talked to my old buddy there in Winnipeg, Rumpin Ronnie Hawkins, or in Toronto, Rumpin Ronnie Hawkins, and man, I'd like to see him again. I'm going to be in Toronto here in a couple of 3 weeks, about 6 weeks, and I may just pop in and see Ronnie. He's awesome. A hell of a character, that man.
Yep. So this has been the Delicious Recipe here on Thursday. This is May the 5th, I believe it is, and I just want to thank everybody that tuned in and thanks again to Big Jim for being there. And we'll see you all next week, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Delicious Recipe.